I want to be clear about one thing before I tell you the rest. I didn't know. Nobody is going to believe that, and I understand why. 11 months. She was aboard the Davin Thresh for 11 months before the sweep, working third-shift systems on the engine deck, and I was the senior crew chief, who signed her assignment roster every rotation. If anyone should have known, the argument goes, it was me. I had her name on my boards every day. I logged her hours. I reviewed her fault reports. But I didn't know, and neither did the ship's registry, the fleet intake manifold, or the 3 separate biometric entries she passed through when she first came aboard at Kethrin Station. Whatever she had done to suppress the markers had been thorough and old, and none of our instruments had caught it until the sweep. The sweep only ran because of the cascade. We were holding maintenance orbit around the Thresh relay, 42 days out from the nearest inhabited station, when the tertiary coolant line blew a spectral shear along its secondary coupling. It was not a catastrophic failure. Nobody died, nobody panicked, and the deck it happened on was half empty at 0300 hours. But it meant the environmental seals on decks 5 through 7 had to be checked manually, which meant I had to account for every breathing body is in that section, which meant I ran a mandatory biometric sweep of all 97 crew members, holding berths in the affected zone. Standard procedure. I had run it a dozen times in my 12 years on relay carriers. It takes about 20 minutes and tells you nothing interesting. Name, species, mass, respiratory status. Flag for any active medical conditions that the medic on call needs to know about. I sent the sweep file to the duty medic, quiet Herev woman named Tasik, and went back to supervising the seal check. Tasik came to find me 40 minutes later. Not a message. Not a flag on my board. She walked to where I was crouched behind a junction panel on deck 6, and she stood there until I noticed her. She looked like she wasn't sure how to put it. "Coss," she said. "The sweep flagged something." "Medical hold?" I asked. We'd had 2 respiratory flags already that rotation, both minor. "Not a medical hold." She hesitated. "The registry doesn't have a category for it." That got my attention. I came out from behind the panel and looked at her properly. Tasik was 12 years a fleet medic. She had a composed, unhurried way about her that I respected. She did not look composed right now. "Show me," I said. She handed me the data pad. The sweep results were arranged in the standard column format. Name, species, biometric hash, flag type. 96 of them had the ordinary green margin clearance I expected. One of them had a margin color I had never seen the registry display in 12 years. Not red for medical hold, not amber for incomplete file. A deep, even blue that I recognized after a moment as the shade the Galactic Compact archives use for sovereign lineage records. The name in that row was Orvale Myth. I stood there for a moment reading it twice. "Myth," I said. "Engine deck." "Third shift systems," Tasik said. "She's been aboard since Kethrin. I know who she is." I handed the pad back. I was thinking, what does the blue margin mean exactly, in terms of protocol? "It means," Tasik said carefully, "that her biometric hash resolved against the Sovereign Compact sealed bloodline registry. The registry doesn't get queried in a standard sweep. I don't know what triggered the cross-match." She paused. "I need to exhalate this to the captain." "I know," I said. "Do it. I'll be on the deck. I want to tell you what I was thinking." In the minutes after Tasik walked away, because I have been asked about it, and the honest answer is less dramatic than people want it to be. I was not thinking about the politics of it, or what it meant for the ship, or whether I was in any kind of trouble. I was thinking about Orvale Myth, and what I knew about her from 11 months, of working the same vessel. I knew she was good. That was the first thing. She had come aboard with a standard competency rating from whatever her previous berth had been. Mid-tier. Nothing that demanded attention. And within 3 rotations I had noticed that the ratings were either modest or falsified, because her actual work was well above them. She found faults in the coolant distribution manifold that my senior engineer had missed. She rewrote the diagnostic sequence for the secondary drive coupling in a way that saved roughly 40 minutes per maintenance cycle, and when I asked her about it, she explained it in clear, direct language without any of the performance some crew put on when they're trying to impress the chief. She was not trying to impress me. She was just solving the problem. She was quiet. Not shy, not unfriendly, just economical. She spoke when she had something to say and was otherwise content to work. There is a kind of person who fills silence as a matter of anxiety, talks to prove they belong, and Orvale was not that. She belonged and she knew it, and she did not need to announce it. What I knew about how she was treated was less comfortable to think about. My senior engineer, a man named Perev, had a way of managing the alien crew members that I had addressed twice in formal documentation and once in direct conversation. He did not shout. He did not do anything that would survive a clear-cut complaint. He simply had a register he used for human crew and a different register he used for the 4 non-human crew members on the engine deck, and the difference between those registers. The slight pause before he acknowledged an answer, the way he repeated instructions back as if the first time hadn't counted, the particular quality of his silence when one of them contributed in a team brief, was the kind of thing that technically wasn't anything but, practically was everything. Orvale had never filed a complaint. I didn't ask her not to. I didn't offer her anything in exchange. She just hadn't. I had tried to counterbalance it in the small ways available to me, keeping her assignments interesting, making sure her shift proposals went into the log without the editorial comments. Perev liked to add to the others, acknowledging her in the team briefs directly rather than through him. These were not grand gestures. They were ordinary decencies of the sort that any crew member ought to be able to count on without some patting themselves on the back for providing. I am not telling you about them to make myself sound like I earned something. I am telling you because they are part of what happened later. And I want you to understand that at the time they felt like nothing at all. Let me tell you about the first time I really understood how good she was, because it matters to the rest of this. It was the 4th rotation after she came aboard. We had a fault developing in the primary drive distribution panel. Not catastrophic, persistent. The kind of recurring minor fault that is more expensive in maintenance hours than a single large repair because it never fails completely and so never compels you to fix it properly. My senior engineer Perev had been managing it with patch adjustments for 2 months before her arrival, and he had a theory about the cause that he had logged with confidence and that I had provisionally accepted. Vale filed a brief technical note at the end of her 3rd shift. It was 2 paragraphs, very plain language, no excess. She had reviewed the fault history and the patch log. She noted, without any particular emphasis, that the symptom pattern was inconsistent with Perev's identified cause and consistent, instead, with a thermal stress fracture in a secondary conduit housing that ran behind the primary panel, a location that would not be visible in any of the standard diagnostic approaches, which was why it had persisted. She suggested a specific inspection method and estimated the repair at 4 hours. I took the note to Perev. He looked at it for a moment. He said, in the register he used for the alien crew members, that the crew member Mytheth had probably misread the fault pattern, and that her suggestion was based on an incomplete understanding of this particular system. I sent the note to our senior technical specialist instead. She confirmed within the hour that the secondary conduit housing was the issue and that the inspection method Orvale had proposed was the correct one. We ran the 4-hour repair. Persistent fault resolved. I updated the fault log under Orvale's name. I sent Perev a brief note explaining what I had done and why. He acknowledged it without comment. Orvale never mentioned it. She did not ask me whether the note had been acted on, did not look for credit, did not reference the repair in any subsequent brief. She came in the following shift and did her work. The fault was fixed, and she had known how to fix it, and that was the end of it, as far as she was concerned. That was what I meant when I said she was not trying to impress me. She was simply solving the problem. I walked down to the engine deck. She was at her station, which was a recessed console on the aft port wall that she kept cleaner than anyone else kept theirs. 3rd shift had another hour to run. The deck was mostly empty, 2 other crew members at the far end, neither paying us attention. Shh. The overhead lights on the engine deck are functional rather than comfortable. A sharp blue-white that makes everyone look a little tired. Orvale looked the same as she always did. Focused, unhurried, her dark auburn coils bound back under the gray maintenance hood she wore on shift. Skin was the warm gray copper I had learned to recognize at a distance, the way you learn to recognize any colleague. Eyes were pale gold, with a deep amber ring at the iris, and they were watching the console, and then they were watching me. She had heard me coming. She always heard me coming, which I had taken for attentiveness and now wondered about. I stopped a few feet away. I did not know exactly what I was going to say. Tasek ran the sweep, I said. She brought me the results. Orvale was quiet for a moment. She looked at the console once, briefly, and then looked back at me. Her expression was not fear. It was not guilt. It was something more measured than either of those. A stillness that reminded me, in a way I couldn't quite name at the time, someone waiting to see which way a thing will land. I know, she said. I took a breath. I have to ask you directly. The biometric hash resolved against the Sovereign Compact Registry. I watched her face. Is the result accurate? She held my gaze for a moment. Then, slowly, she said, yes. There was a longer silence. The deck hummed around us. The ordinary mechanical heartbeat of a working relay carrier in maintenance orbit. I thought about the 11 months. I thought about the coolant manifold diagnosis. I thought about the look on Perev's face when she corrected his calculation at the brief, and he had paused before acknowledging it. Okay, I said. She looked at me. I was not sure what she was expecting me to say next. Maybe she was not sure either. I need to tell you the captain is going to be notified, I said. Tasek is escalating now. Whatever happens next is above my authority to manage. I paused. I'm telling you as a courtesy so you hear it from me before you hear it through the ship's comm. Orvale was quiet again. Then she said, very simply, thank you. I nodded and went back up to the junction panel on Deck 6, where I had 3 more SEAL checks to finish before the shift ended, and I finished them. The captain's name was Envar Soreth. He was a serious, experienced officer, Hirev-born, 22 years in the fleet, and when he called me to the command gallery at A6 Ode, I found him standing with the fleet liaison, a tall Kisiri woman named Adjutor Thavain, and Tasek, and no one else. The gallery overlooked the main observation dome, the relay structure a pale lattice against the dark beyond the glass. Thavain spoke first. She had the careful diction of someone choosing every word twice before it left her mouth. Chief Koss, you were the supervising officer who ordered the biometric sweep. I was. And you spoke with the crew member Myth following the sweep result. I told her the captain would be notified, as a courtesy. Thavain looked at Soreth and then back at me. The result has been verified through 3 independent registries in the last 40 minutes. The compact recognition protocol is activated. She set a datapad on the table. Orville Myth is the sovereign heir of the Myth Compact, a lineage the Sovereign Registry had listed as extinct, 63 years following the dissolution of the Outer Ring Accords. She is not extinct. I looked at the pad. I did not pick it up. Compact protocols require her to be addressed by title, Thavain continued. They require the commanding officer to formally acknowledge her standing. They require that any prior treatment inconsistent with sovereign protocols be documented and assessed, and they require that her registered bond partner, if any, be identified and their standing confirmed. I looked up from the pad. Bond partner. Under the original Myth Compact terms, the sovereign heir's chosen bond partner is a co-signatory to the Compact's reactivation. It is an old covenant. The language is pre-standard. Thavain's voice was very even. She will be asked to name one if she has one. The registry allows for a bond partner of any species. Soreth had been watching me throughout this. He said nothing. I understand, I said. You are dismissed back to your duties, Chief Koss. We will be speaking with Myth, with the Sovereign here, within the hour. I went back to the engine deck. What happened over the next several hours, I can only tell you in pieces, because I was not in the room for most of it. I know from Tasek that Orvale was brought to the command gallery at Zo 730. I know that Soreth formally acknowledged her standing, and that Thavain transmitted a priority signal to the fleet that traveled via the relay structure we were orbiting, and that it would reach 3 different fleet commands within 6 hours. I know that the crew received a general notification that morning that was careful and brief and told them almost nothing, only that a matter of fleet-level administrative significance had arisen, and that normal operations were to continue. Normal operations did not exactly continue. The engine deck was quieter than usual. Rev was absent from the brief I ran at 0900. He had requested emergency personal leave to be processed. He was entitled to, and which I noted without comment. The two crew members who had been on deck during my conversation with Orvale were young and fairly new, and had the slightly stunned look of people who were processing something large. I ran the brief. I assigned the morning's work, checked the coolant distribution manifold, because there was a minor vibration in the starboard coupling that I wanted to track before it became something else. At 1100, one of the junior crew came to find me. Chief Kos, the captain's gallery is requesting your presence. I set down my instruments. Did they say why? No, sir. I went up. The gallery had more people in it than it had at 0600. Sorth was there, and Thavain, and Tasik, and two other figures I did not recognize. One in Hirev fleet dress uniform with senior insignia, one in the gray and copper attire of a compact registry official. The official was holding a bound ledger that looked very old. Orvale was there. She was not in her maintenance hood. She was in her off-duty clothes, which were simple, dark trousers, plain gray-blue top, and she was standing very straight. And she looked, if I'm honest about it, exactly the same as she always looked. Focused stillness. The same pale gold eyes with the amber ring. She was watching the door when I came through it. Gaze shifted to me and stayed there. I stepped into the room and stopped. The vein gestured toward a chair, but I remained standing. Chief Kos, Sorth said. He was formal, careful. The sovereign here has made a request of the registry official under compact covenant terms. Quest concerns you. I looked at Orvale. She was still watching me. That waiting stillness. I understood it now, or thought I did. Sorth continued. She has been asked to name a bond partner for the compact reactivation. She has named you. The room was quiet. The relay structure gleamed beyond the glass in the pale light of maintenance orbit. I was aware of the registry official holding the ledger, fleet officer watching with a carefully composed face, of Thavain standing very still. I looked at Orvale. She spoke then, directly to me, as though the others in the room were background. Her voice was what it had always been, level, clear, unhurried. I want to tell you what I'm asking you, she said. I'm not asking you to take on a debt. I'm not asking you to honor a covenant you know nothing about out of obligation to the protocol. I'm asking you because I want to ask you. A pause. You can decline. The compact allows it. I thought about the 11 months. I thought about the manifold, and the brief, and the maintenance hood, and the mornings when I had arrived at the deck before the shift started and found her already there, working, without making anything of it. I thought about the data pad with the blue margin, and the way she had said simply, quietly, yes, when I asked if the result was accurate. I thought about the word she had used after I told her about the captain. Thank you. Not relieved, not grateful, in the effusive way of someone who has been under pressure, just, thank you. Person who had been treated reasonably, and was acknowledging it in kind. Can I ask you one thing first, I said. Yes, she said. The 11 months. The reason for them. I was trying to put it plainly. I'm not asking about the politics of the compact. I'm asking whether you are all right. Whether you are here because you wanted to be here, or because something drove you here. She was quiet for a moment. Her expression did not change exactly, but something in it shifted. The barest softening. The way a held thing eases when it no longer needs to be held so tightly. I needed to know, she said, what it was like to be a person, and not a lineage. To work because I was competent, and not because I was owed deference. She looked at me steadily. I found out. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I looked at the registry official. What does the bond partner designation require of me, specifically? The official's voice was dry and careful. The voice of someone reading from something very old, co-signature on the compact reactivation. Standing acknowledgement of the sovereign heir's primacy in matters of lineage and compact governance. Your own standing and identity are registered alongside hers in the compact record. The covenant is not coercive. It does not transfer your obligations, your rank, or your property. It is, in the old language of the compact, witness bond. You witness her sovereignty. She witnesses your worth. I looked at Orvale again. She was waiting. That was what I had been reading in her. From the first moment she had watched me come across the engine deck this morning, from the way she had held my gaze when I asked my direct question and answered it with a plain yes. She had been waiting to see which way I would land, and she had been calm about it, genuinely calm. Not resigned, not braced, calm. She was a person who had compressed 11 months of working in the dark and being treated with ordinary decent competence, and had arrived at this moment and was now quietly and without theater, asking, "I'll sign," I said. The vein let out a slow breath. Tss. The fleet officer stood a little straighter. The registry official opened the ledger. Fail looked at me for a moment and then looked away. Not with relief exactly, but with the quality of a thing settled, a decision confirmed, a long wait reaching its conclusion. When she looked back, her eyes were steady, and the gold in them caught the pale light from the observation dome. And I thought, 11 months, and I did not know, and now I do, and the honest truth is that it does not change what I know about her at all. The signing took 20 minutes. The ledger was physical, actual pages, actual ink. A choice the compact official explained had been deliberate. A preservation of the original covenant's form. My signature went below hers. Her hand was steady as she signed. Mine was too. Thavain transmitted the updated registry filing immediately. Soreth formally addressed her by title, in front of the fleet officer and the official, satisfied the protocol requirement. She received it without visible ceremony. A slight inclination of her head, nothing more. When the official procedures were concluded, the room began to empty in that particular way of rooms where important things have just been settled, and the important people need to go transmit important communications. Soreth caught my eye on the way out and held it for a moment. Not with displeasure, not with congratulation, just with the look of a man who has navigated something unexpected and is still taking stock of what it means. I held his gaze and nodded, and he nodded back. Thane was the last to leave besides the two of us. She paused at the door. "The fleet will send a sovereign-class transport," she said. "It will arrive in approximately 9 days. Until then, the ship's normal operations continue. A beat. Both of you are on the ship's roster until then." She left. Orvale and I were alone in the gallery. The relay structure turned slowly beyond the observation dome, the lattice of it picking up the faint starlight. We stood at the railing above the dome, the darkness and the stars below us, and neither of us spoke for a moment. "Parev," I said, "my senior engineer." "He has always been exactly what you see," she said. I was not surprised by him. I documented it. "I know. I saw the documentation logs on the ship's system." A pause. "It was there before I came. You had been filing those reports for 2 years. I had not known she had seen that. I didn't say anything." "I want to tell you something," she said. "About the 11 months." She was looking at the relay structure, its slow turn. "When I came aboard here, I had been in 4 other berths in the previous 3 years. Working, as I told you, learning what it was to be treated as a competent person and not as a lineage. In 3 of those berths, the answer was that it depended on who was checking. The decent treatment came and went, according to who was watching." She paused. "On this ship, it did not depend on who was watching. You were the same when no one was checking as you were in the formal brief. That is not common. I had nothing to say to that. It had not felt like anything particular to me. It was simply how I ran a deck. I recognized that it might not be simply anything to someone who had been watching for it across 4 berths and 11 months. The compact bond," I said. "I want to be plain with you about something. Go ahead. I am 46 years old. I am a crew chief on a relay carrier. I have 12 years of maintenance logs and a record of formal commendations and 1 administrative reprimand for filing a report that predicted a senior officer. I kept my eyes on the relay structure. I do not know what the compact reactivation means in political terms. I do not know what the next years look like. But I want you to know that the reason I signed is not the protocol, and it is not the covenant language about witness and worth. It is because I have worked alongside you for 11 months, and I think you are extraordinary, and when you asked me, I found that I did not want to say no." There was a silence. "I know," she said. I looked at her. She was looking at me now, pale gold eyes direct and steady. Something in her expression had eased further. Shh. Beyond the settling I had seen when I agreed to sign. It was the look of a person who had heard the thing they were actually waiting to hear, which was not the ceremonial answer but the honest one. "The fleet will send formal advisors," she said. "There will be a great deal of procedural weight. The compact's reactivation has implications I have been carrying the outline of for a long time." She paused. "I would like someone to stand beside me who has never been impressed by rank and has never adjusted their behavior based on who is." "Can do that," I said. "I know," she said again. The corner of her mouth moved, barely, not quite a smile, but the precursor to one, the shape the face makes when a smile is present but doesn't yet need to announce itself. I looked back at the relay structure. "I have to check the starboard coupling vibration," I said. "I started tracking it this morning, and I don't want to leave it until second shift." "I know," she said. "I noticed it yesterday. The resonance pattern suggests a microfracture in the secondary mount. Not catastrophic. It should be addressed before the transport arrives." I looked at her. "You filed a report?" "It's in the fault queue, under my name." I shook my head, not in irritation, in something more like recognition, the small kind. The kind that accumulated over 11 months without announcing itself and then turns out to have been the point all along. "Walk with me," I said. She fell into step beside me. The 9 days between the filing and the transport's arrival had a particular quality that I did not have a good word for at the time. The ship continued its work. We were still in maintenance orbit, still cycling through the relay structure's inspection schedule, and the engine deck ran, because engine decks are required to run regardless of what has happened in the command gallery. But there was something different in the texture of those days. A kind of held breath that was not anxiety exactly, but the feeling of a thing having shifted that had not yet finished shifting. I ate lunch in the crew mess on the third day. The mess was not a comfortable place to be alone that week. Crew members had found out, through the various informal channels by which crew members always find out what they're not supposed to know yet. And I was aware of being observed. Not unpleasantly, more in the way that a person who has done something unusual is observed by people who are still working out how to categorize it. Orvale came in halfway through my meal. She got her tray from the line. The serving crew, 2 young Hirev civilians, were very careful and very polite with her, which was new, and she looked around the room. She looked at the table where I was sitting. I made no gesture either way. She came and sat across from me. The mess went very quiet. She looked at her tray. She looked up at me. The quiet gold eyes had a dry, careful awareness in them that I recognized as her version of Rye. "This is going to be the dynamic for the next 6 days," she said. "Probably the next several years," I said. She considered this. "The compact advisors will have strong opinions about where I should be." "Where will they want you?" "The Myth Compact's primary station is at the Kesseri Outer Ring Junction. It hasn't been occupied in 63 years. It will require significant restoration." She picked up a utensil and looked at it very briefly, as if deciding whether to say the next thing. "They will want me there. They will want me surrounded by the formal structure of the compact at all times. They will have correct and well-intentioned plans for every hour of my day. Is that what you want?" She was quiet for a moment. Around us the mess had returned to a low murmur of conversation, the crew apparently deciding to give us something resembling privacy. "I want," she said carefully, "to continue to do work that matters. I want to be useful in the actual practical sense, not ceremonially useful, not symbolically present. The compact's reactivation has genuine significance. The Outer Ring Accords were never properly dissolved. They were simply abandoned when the lineage was listed as extinct. There are treaty obligations that were left in suspension and have been generating low-level friction for 60 years without anyone identifying the source, because no one knew the compact still technically existed." She looked at me directly. "I understand all of this. I am not going to avoid it. I am to do it. But," I said, "I would prefer not to do it surrounded only by people who address me by title and adjust their behavior based on who is watching." She paused. "The bond partner designation gives me standing to set certain conditions regarding my own household and working environment. The advisors will respect those conditions because the compact requires it." I nodded. I was beginning to understand the shape of what she had done. Not just the naming, but the timing of it, the setting, the particular care with which she had spoken to me before the official procedures. She had thought about this for more than the time between the sweep and the gallery. "How long have you been planning this?" I said. Quite smile. "I told you I knew within the first 60 days. I looked at my lunch. I looked at her. I thought about 60 days and another 9 months and four previous births and a woman who had compressed all of that into the patience of waiting to see whether the thing she had found was what it appeared to be. That's a long time to wait," I said. "Yes," she said. "It was worth it." I had nothing to add to that. We finished our lunch in the particular comfortable quiet of people who do not need to fill the air between them, treat, while the crew mess went about its business around us, and the relay structure turned outside the hull, and the 9 days counted down toward the transport's arrival. The Sovereign-class transport arrived on the 9th day, as Thavain had said it would. It was larger than the Daven Thresh, and considerably more ornate. The hull plating worked in the traditional Myth Compact livery, deep copper with a narrow band of pale gold along the primary hull seam, and it drew the attention of every crew member who happened to be near a viewport when it approached. There was a formal reception in the main bay. Soreth stood at the head of the ship's officers. Thavain stood beside him, fleet, liaison's role completed, and her expression carrying the careful composure of someone who had managed an unusual event and was cautiously satisfied with how it had gone. The Compact Transport's delegation came aboard, 3 senior advisors in formal attire, a registry keeper, and 2 escort personnel in copper and gold dress armor that looked like it had not changed in design since the original Compact signings. Orvale walked to meet them. She was in her off-duty clothes, the same as she had been in the gallery on the day of the signing. I had wondered whether she would change for this, whether there would be some transformation of presentation. There was not. She walked with the same unhurried steadiness she had always had, and she greeted the senior advisor by name. The advisors looked at her with an emotion I can only describe as a kind of overwhelming relief. The relief of people who have been waiting to find something for 63 years and have finally found it. The senior advisor, an older Kasiri woman, angular face, gray-streaked hair, called Varath, spoke a formal phrase I did not understand. Orvale answered it. I was standing at Soreth's shoulder, and I watched Vorath's face as Orvale spoke. The compact phrase, old language, pre-standard, the same register as the Covenant ledger, landed on the advisor's face like a key, finding a lock that had been still for decades. Vorath closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were wet. She had not expected that. None of them had expected her to know the old phrases. I thought about 11 months and 4 Prius births in the maintenance hood, and the diagnostic sequence and the fault report in the queue, and thought, of course she knows them. She has simply been choosing very carefully when to use what she knows. Vorath looked across the bay. Eyes found me. I met them. Vorath spoke again, something brief, and Orvale turned to look at me and said, in standard language, "She is asking about you. What did you tell her?" "I told her you were my bond partner and the crew chief of the engine deck." A pause. "She is asking what she should know about you." I held Vorath's gaze. "Tell her I keep a well-maintained deck." Orvale looked at me for a moment. That not-quite smile came back. "I told her," she said, "that you were the same whether or not anyone was watching." She paused. "She says that is sufficient." Vorath inclined her head toward me in the old formal way, a deep, deliberate gesture, the kind that carries weight in a lineage that does not give deference easily. I returned it. Art. The formal departure was the following morning. I had 1 shift left on the Daven Thresh, and I ran it. I checked the starboard coupling. The microfracture had been addressed the day after Orvale pointed me to her fault report, a straightforward bracket replacement, and the coupling was running clean. I ran the brief. I assigned the work. Rev had not returned from his administrative leave. His temporary replacement was a capable woman named Sereth, who had been waiting for the opportunity and was making good use of it. At the end of the shift, I turned in my duty log to Soreth's office, which was the proper procedure for a crew chief leaving a vessel. Soreth signed it himself. We did not exchange many words. What we exchanged was enough. The transport's access bay was open at Eero 700. I was the last aboard, because I had a thing I wanted to check. The primary junction panel on Deck 6. The same one I had been crouched behind when Tasek came to find me. I checked it. It was fine. It had been fine for 11 months, maintained to spec, reliable in the way of a thing that has been properly cared for. I went up the transport's ramp. Orvale was in the forward gallery, standing at the observation panel as the Daven Thresh pulled slowly into background view. A relay carrier in maintenance orbit, unremarkable at distance. The kind of ship that holds the fleet's infrastructure together through the accumulated competence of its engine decks. She watched it for a moment without speaking. 11 months, I said. 11 months, she said. That long to find out what it was like to be a person and not a lineage. She was quiet for a moment. I found out early, she said. 2 months had passed. You reviewed my first diagnostic proposal, and you approved it without modification. And you put it in the log under my name. She turned from the viewport to look at me. I knew within the first 60 days. The rest of the time I stayed because I did not want to leave. I looked at her. The pale gold eyes with the amber ring. The warm gray copper of her. The same face I had been looking at across a console, or a work brief, or a junction panel for 11 months, which I had understood as competent and precise, and which now I was understanding as something else as well. Patient, hopeful, watching to see which way a thing would land. I'm glad you stayed, I said. I know, she said. There was the not-quite smile again. So am I. The Daven Thresh fell away behind us as the transport turned toward the relay. The stars ahead were the same ones I had looked at for 12 years from maintenance orbit. They looked the same, and they were the same. And the difference between this morning and every other morning was exactly as large as a single decision made by a person who had been watching for 63 years of extinction and had found what it was looking for in an engine deck chief on a relay carrier who ran his deck the same, whether or not anyone was checking. I stood beside her at the viewport and watched the Thresh go small against the dark, and neither of us needed to say anything else, and we did not.